For those of you who don't know us, John is my partner here. We work together, teach together, do a podcast together, do readings and jam about human design almost nonstop, to the point where our children are like, no more numbers, stop with the numbers. We're happy to be working together. We didn't put our relationship in here as an example, but I think it's important anytime you're learning about human design to know who your filter is and to be aware of who you're receiving information from, because it's absolutely going to color how people speak. And I have certainly found, and I always say whenever we're teaching, that I tend to learn as much from studying the chart of the person who's filtering what they're speaking to as I do from the information itself. So we didn't actually put our charts in, but you can look at them. They're on the list. I'm a mental projector. I have the 6124 and the 4323 going down the center line. 5-1 profile. Highly individual, almost all individual gates in my nodes and in my incarnation cross. So I'm definitely a freak, and I'm also feeling cognition, so I'm excited about this experience because I haven't gotten to have this experience very much. And even I sort of had mixed feelings when Jonah was like, you're in a space with no projector and no screens, and part of me was like, oh, we're not used to that. But then another part of me was like, yes, paper, things I can touch, people, I can just look at people. So I'm happy to get to have this experience. John, do you want to say hello, or do you want me to introduce you?
Sure. I'm John. If you haven't seen my design, I'm a 2-4 ego projector, cross for the unexpected, so single 2551 channel. Hi, Lisa. And and yeah, it's great to be here in person, see some familiar faces and some new faces, and yeah, hope we can have some fun today.
So there's a lot we could talk about in terms of relationship, and I would love to just stay here with you all for 3 weeks and just teach a whole relationship course, but we're going to try to distill it down to the simple, the basic, the most experiential parts of it. If I'm going to assume, well, I'll ask some questions here. So if you guys don't mind telling me, how many of you are already working with human design, reading with people, coaching people? Okay, so most people here. Okay. So in our connection chart, John and I, we have the connection chart of an emotional manifesting generator. We have the whole defense circuit, the 5027 and the 596. We have the 8-1 as an electromagnetic in the middle. We have the 1762 from the ajna to the throat. We have a split in the design, and somebody asked, and we'll talk more about it later, but anytime I see a split in an individual design, to me it's like there are two different people inside of one person. So if you have a relationship design where you've got splits, you may feel like you've got two different relationships and that they have different realms, and that sometimes you're more in one, sometimes you're more in the other. Sometimes you get bridged and everything's sort of flowing. Sometimes that's when weird things come out. So we have that dynamic. So we've got a sort of a public-facing relationship, and then we've got our sort of inner defense circuit relationship. If you know anything about Penta and Wa, we're doing a Penta talk tomorrow with Melissa over there. I have found that since we have gotten together, the groups we tend to end up in front of and working with online tend to be Was. And neither of us are very strong Penta people. So somehow to me that represents some part of a mechanical absolute in terms of how these things play out. So, anything else about us? I've got the throat, so I'm usually the talker, and John's got the will, so he drives the love and the initiation. So, yeah, so we're happy.
And we've had to learn to operate as an emotional manifesting generator to some degree, at least when we're in operation together.
Yes. Yeah.
Tricky as two individual projectors.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and I think that comes up a lot. We'll talk about that more later too, but it's very interesting to be two single definition kind of internally independent people, and then find that in the relationship there's suddenly emotionality, there's a split, there's a whole process, there's a lot going on. So then how we function together is it's been a massive learning process for us, trial and error process. Lots of things don't go smoothly, lots of things end up being an experiment and a kind of a mystery, and a continual kind of coming together, coming apart to figure out who are you, what are you about, who am I, what am I about, how do we function together, and then interface with life, with parenting, with business, with people, socially as a couple. So it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating to get to see what we become in relationship with each other. So in terms of, I think before we talk about relationship in detail and looking at specific relationships, I think we really have to consider the ocean that we're all swimming in. I don't know if there have been a lot of talks. I don't think there have been a whole lot of talks here this particular conference about 2027 and about global cycle change, but I think the change that we're going through here with 2027 is probably in some ways most profoundly affecting us relationally. And I know that in both of our practices, we're seeing so many people show up with a lot of challenges in relationship, and I don't think it's in isolation. I don't think it's happening just because of the mechanics of the chart. We've got the mechanics of what each of us are. There are certain absolutes in that any of us who've been experimenting with human design for a long time likely have to accept. This is the limitation and the mechanical makeup of my system, of my consciousness, of my form. And the more we experiment with that, I think the more we tend to find that there are limitations in that. There are deep limitations in that. There are deep things to accept in that. There are things we may try to overcome in that, and then we find out, shit, the truth is here again. I can't get around this thing. It's a fixture in me. And then we find that in relationship as well. And yet, while all of that's going on in our interpersonal dynamics, we're swimming in this sea of a planet that's being deeply affected by these forces that are changing the context of everything that we're in. And it gets talked about all the time, but I don't know. I guess for me, the experience is like there are these moments where it hits me really deeply. And I understand why Ra was so emphatic about how profound it would be to lose the cross of planning and to have that turn into the cross of the sleeping phoenix as the dominating frequency on this planet. I don't know if we can overestimate the level at which that's affecting all of us as individuals and in relationship. So if we start there and we just look at the cross of planning, and we know that that involves the 40-37 and it involves the 59 and the 55, part of what to me is about mechanical absolutes is really just the body graph itself. So before we get into lines and substructure and which planets are activating what, there's a ton of information there, so much to explore on that level. But when we're talking about mechanical absolutes, which is a lot of what Rob referred to in the Living Your Design course especially, we're really just talking about the body graph itself. So even if you weren't looking at the specific planetary activations, you're just looking at the body graph. There, what you're really focused on is seeing the centers, what's defined, what's undefined, seeing what the channel definition is, where the activations are, how things are connecting. So if we think about the cross of planning and we think about the 40-37, it's significant that we're going between two crosses that both have a full channel definition. So 40-37, we're looking at a defined ego and a defined solar plexus. And then we've got the 16 and the 9. But if we look at what it means to have a defined ego and a defined solar plexus be what we're all swimming in, then there's this tremendous force all around us that is promoting all the things we know about the 40-37, all the things we know about ego definition and emotionality. It's going to be promoting tribal interaction. It's promoting mutual support. It's a sea of a willfulness, a commitment, a hard work, and also affection, emotionality, loyalty. So that's been the ocean we've been swimming in. for some of us, we've probably been pretty good at that. If you have the 4037 in your own chart, if you are more of a tribal being, you've probably felt like that this is your home. You can understand that, you know. For a lot of us that have undefined egos, for those of us who may not have tribal definition, we probably on some level, to varying degrees, been working really hard to try to live up to the ideal of what the 4037 ought to be, which ought to be long-lasting, loyal relationships where we show up for each other, we work hard, we take care of each other's needs, we provide. We don't really have to talk about it because there's no throat there. It's understood. There are underlying bargains that we're making with each other all the time with that. So for some of us, that's been more comfortable. For some of it's not. But I would say if we look at what's been the ideal of relationship for these last 400 years, the ideal has been that you have a strong, loyal, long-lasting bargain that you can be proud of, you know, with that ego, where you get affection and loyalty and you have a sense of belonging. And now that that's going away, I can't tell you the number of people that we see all the time that are showing up in a state of, I don't know anymore. What am I supposed to? I think I'm still supposed to find this long-lasting, loyal life partner. I've been trying, or I've had some version of it, but it's not actually working. Suddenly, I feel like I can't maintain it anymore. That frequency as it goes, I think we're losing, those of us who don't have that natively, we're losing some of the background juice to help us stay in it in that way. So now if we start to look at moving into the sleeping phoenix, and we're moving into a cross where the 2034 becomes this dominating channel, it sounds simple, but it's really intense. What is the difference between going from an ego and a solar plexus to a sacral and a throat? Now you've got power, raw power, going directly to the throat in the channel of busyness and charisma. It's not about loyalty anymore. It's not about bargains. It's not about self-sacrifice. It's not about anything long-lasting. It's about what am I charismatically busy about now, me? What I have to say and do, what I want, my power manifesting now. I think this is part of why what we see being revered on a personality level, or in the way people present themselves to the world, is everybody wants to be the most charismatic. Everybody wants to be busy, you know, a busy, charismatic, active, impactful, manifesting person, you know? And if we look at what is that going to do to us in terms of being a background frequency of relationship, I think we're losing a lot of juice for that. So now it becomes can we maintain long-lasting, dynamic partnerships? You know, how do we stay in our tribes, in our groups? How do we get our needs met? Now the background frequency is about empowerment, and in a large part, it's about self-empowerment. So just think about that. It's like, think about coming together in relationship and swimming in an ocean of, I'm here to empower me, you're here to empower you. How's this gonna go? You know, maybe we could say, if we look at it from a hopeful perspective, that the 59 and the 55 potentially at some point give us a hope of finding some inherent intimacy and true resonance as individuals. But in some ways, that may be all we have left going forward. I mean, except for those of us that have maybe strong native tribal activation in our own design, those of us who natively know how to build communities. But it's going to be in this context of self-empowered individuals trying to find resonance with each other. And in some ways, it's almost like the resonance is there and we don't necessarily know for how long until it's not. But I think it's making it a lot harder to make a bargain, make an agreement, come up with some sort of plan, have some sort of religion or culture or family or community that holds us together and helps us stay in it when it gets hard. And if you look at the mechanical absolutes of relationship, every relationship is gonna get hard. It's gonna get hard at some point, and the longer you're in it, the clearer it's probably gonna be exactly how it's hard, and that we can't escape that. So I'm gonna pause for a second and put on my sweater. Is it gonna rain on us? Part two. Okay, so the change is coming. It may be dark at first. So I think a big part of this shift is that there were things that we could in some ways count on before through those agreements, through those bargains, things that didn't necessarily need to be named. So if you said I'm married, we knew what that meant. Now, if somebody says they're married, you have no idea what that means. You don't know if they're the same religion. You don't know if they sleep together. You don't know how many other people they sleep with. You don't know if they live in the same house. You don't know if they have kids or not. So with this 2034 coming in, I think in order to make it in relationship, it's going to require a lot more communication, a lot more sorting out who are we each as an individual, and can we accept each other for what we are. I think as we look at some of these charts, you can see right away exactly what's going to be difficult. It tends to be the case that, especially early in the relationship, it's not that big of a deal. And over time, it wears in. My favorite analogy for that is one of my best friends years ago. She was in the process of buying a house. I had never bought a house before. And she said, you know, when you're really eager to buy a house and you're walking through, you're going to tend to highlight in your mind all the things you like about it, and you're going to notice those little things that you don't love, you know, or those little things that aren't quite what you want them to be. But when you're so excited about buying the house, you're going to kind of put that to the side and say, oh, it won't be that big of a deal. But when you actually are living in that house every single day, and every single time you walk into the kitchen and there's that thing in that place where you don't want it to be, it really grinds down in there what your own preferences are and whether or not you actually like that thing or it's easy for you to deal with. So I think a big challenge in relationship, and this is where we come to the mechanical absolutes. When we're looking at mechanical absolutes, we're looking at our own designs, our type, our strategy, our center definition, our channel definition, these things that are an inherent part of us that we can't get rid of, these things that are an inherent part of us that show us where we have no choice. And then we're looking at how those dynamics come together with another person and seeing there are mechanical absolutes to this relationship. John and I, for example, are very emotionally avoidant people. I have no activations in my solar plexus at all. He's got a couple. We've got an emotional relationship. And we can't blame it on one of us being emotional, which we both could do in other situations. So we have to accept the fact we are in an emotional relationship. Now we've got to learn about what it means to go through the emotional wave, and we're going to go through it together, and that is a mechanical absolute. There's nothing we can do to get rid of that. So this is where I think it's kind of a boon, even though it's kind of intense, that we've had this Pluto transit going on for these last few years of Pluto just hammering on gate 60, which is basically over and over and over again digging deeper and deeper to show us here are the limitations of what is. You can't get around it. You can't make it go away. You can't wish it away. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. Maybe you can get away with those things for a little while, but eventually it's going to come back around, and you're going to feel the pressure of that limitation. The beauty of it, the other side of it, of course, is the potential to accept, to really deeply accept. And this is where we could analyze every relationship combination we could find. We can microanalyze all of it and figure out this is going to work well, this is going to be nice, so this is going to look good, this is going to be hard. But at the end of the day, you're getting a whole human being. You're getting a whole human being that you're interacting with who has their own life, their own consciousness, their own form, their own mechanical absolutes. And you don't get to slice and dice the people that you're with. So you don't get to pick out the parts that you like and the things that you don't. So this gate, what'd you say?
I said yet.
Yet. Yet. I'm with you, sister. Who knows what they'll come up with. But if we can't do that, I think that's where Gate 60 can be such a gift to us, because I think it puts that potential charismatic, impactfully powerful potential in check to say, no matter what you might be trying to manifest, no matter how many lists you've made about the things that you want, the things you don't want, there are likely going to be things that you have to accept. And so here's Pluto, here's Gate 60 saying, this is happening across this whole planet, and nobody, as Peter Schober says, nobody escapes Pluto. So we're all going to learn this lesson. Things you have to accept about yourself, things you have to accept in other people. Accepting things doesn't mean that you have to live with them. But accepting does mean that you face facts, that you face the truth. You don't lie to yourself and other people about pretending that things could be another way. And this is what I think is actually probably the greatest gift of human design, is that it actually gives us some pathways and some tools to be able to look at these mechanical absolutes so that we can at least not suffer with the things that we cannot change. So if we accept that, then we can see, here's the truth of this relationship. Probably no matter what I maneuver around it, it's not going to go away. This is how it is. So I can either live with that. As a Locke likes to say, I can love it up close or I can love it from afar. If you try to love it up close, then that's not what your strategy and authority can actually accept. It's not what your body can actually handle. You're probably going to suffer a lot. You're probably going to make the other person suffer a lot too. So John will often coach me that I'm a bit of a downer. I got a lot of fifth lines. I got guilt motivation. I'm, kind of cranky. I, feel inept as a mental projector most of the time. So the upside of that, though, is that I think if we face the hard facts together, we can actually breathe and accept. And then there's that potential for transcendence. Then there's that potential to find out. If I stop trying to change this thing about myself, change this thing about this other person, what could this actually be? Or how could we actually communicate or find our way through this or not? I mean, if you think, I think all the time of how many relationships I've either been in or I've seen, where they can't have a peaceful breakup. It's like, somebody's got to be, it's like, no, but really you were wrong. Like, no, but actually you fucked it up. Like, it wasn't me, or why did you leave? Or we could have tried harder, we could have made it work. How cool would it be if we could communicate from a place of acceptance and limitation and say, wow, you're limited in these ways, I'm limited in those ways. Here's this relationship, and we just couldn't make it work. But I love you, I respect you, you love me, you respect me, I wish you the best. On to the next formation, whatever that might be. I think that would be really cool. So if we let go of the trying to make things the way we want them to be, potentially we accept things for the way they are, then we get to find out what it's like to have a different level of conversation, which I think is what human design really should be about. And Ra was really hammering on that. Like, won't it be so great when we don't have to argue anymore about who's not self and who's true self and who knows what sacral authority is and who doesn't, and who's a good projector and who's a bad. How cool will it be when we don't have to be in that conversation anymore? And we can be in a conversation where we actually get to commune and talk about this shit that's going on all around us and that we're all swimming in with all the stuff that's happening. And we're not in these weird resistance to what is kind of conversations. So that's my little soapbox on that part. Okay, so I'm just curious, how many of us here are in live-in partnerships, domestic partnerships? You live with your partner? Okay. Occasionally, okay. How many of you are in a relationship but you don't live together? In relationships, you don't live together, okay. And then, how, you were supposed to say, I have one for you at the end. And then, who would consider themselves single? Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, a lot of singles, okay. And who's some combination of these? That would be you. We don't know anymore. Okay. Okay, so what we have certainly found in working with people in relationship is that most people come in for help with relationship either in the very early stages when it's almost like they want to celebrate the goodness of what they found, and they also want a little bit of help to keep it from becoming the horror that they've experienced in the past with other people. How can you help us keep this here and not go there to the place we've all been to? Most people are coming in at that stage of relationship, or they're coming in much later when some of these pain points that they've tried to avoid and change in every way they possibly can, they just can't, and they're in pain and they need help. In both cases, I think it's helpful to be able to look at the dynamic, the mechanical absolutes of the relationship, and to be able to say, here's some things that are probably really nice and going to feel really good, and you've got a kind of synergy here. Here are some things that are probably tough. They might never feel good, and the more you focus on it, it might only get worse the longer the relationship goes on. And then how do we handle that? Sometimes relationships, I think, need a lot more space than we think we want. Sometimes we wish, some part of us longs for, where's my person? My person that I can go through life with, who can be there for me or in my pocket, going through everything together. And that's getting harder and harder and harder to actually manage. It's really, really hard. So if we know that we can't slice and dice the person that we're with, and we know that it's not about finding my partner, I think a lot of us unconsciously, we have this mentality about my partner, my mother, my child, my best friend, and all the things we associate with what that role could be or should be for us. But we're always dealing with a whole other person, with a whole other movie, with a whole other consciousness. And I found it so validating in a course I was in once with a lock, where he said, it's a really challenging expectation to have of each other that we can be in this kind of communion all the time. It's going to make it hard to be in relationship and have that expectation, rather than recognizing that, wow, if we happen to be able to commune and see the same thing in the same way at the same time, it's kind of a miracle, and it's becoming more of a miracle. So the upside maybe of this whole movement is that maybe it gives us, maybe it allows the potential that we can find maybe some relationships where there's just some resonance. And that resonance of spirit, the resonance of awareness, that'll be what the relationship is based on, and the sense of empowerment that comes with that, potentially. It's very different than a bargain, So anyway, I think we're all adapting to that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, how's that? Is that better? Okay. Okay. I'm glad I'm not a 515. I'd be so frustrated. Thank you so much, Roger. That was a lot. You're sweating and you're probably soaked also. Thank you.
I'll live.
You'll live. There's
Third line
worse.
life, right?
Third line life. Are you third line? Third line life. Yeah. This is a very third line experience. So yes. Yeah. Okay. 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 So if we look at the mechanics in relationship, then we could microanalyze a lot of things. We're gonna keep it to the mechanical absolutes. So the one thing that we don't really have slated to discuss too far is line level and profile and angle. So I do want to make the note that those are very significant things. Ross certainly suggested that someday as we move through this transition and we get to the other side of it, that there would be more of a tendency to be drawn to partnership type to type and angle to angle. So angle is not a small thing, I don't think. But we're going to focus on type and center definition and circuitry. So type is probably what we could call the most profound and foundational mechanical absolute. And I know early in the early days of human design, there was no type that had not been created yet or brought in as languaging from Ra yet. And there was just the people who were designed to do or not. So once we look at type, if we accept that, if we've all experimented enough to be able to observe that there is a kind of mechanical absolute to that, then the nature of these different auras is really profound. And no matter how many times, for me personally, how many years I spent going into all kinds of different details, the profound effects of the mechanics of the aura never go away. So if we look at generators having the open, enveloping, life force giving energy that they bring, that is a very particular kind of aura. It's got a bigness to it. It has a lot to give. It takes a lot in. It's inherently interactive. And there's a fullness to it. And there's a fullness that's like a 360 fullness, you know? The generator aura has that energetic flow that's all around in that field. So if you are a generator, that is likely one of your mechanical absolutes. That wherever you go, you have that open, enveloping aura that doesn't change about you. And it likely means that whatever you come in contact with becomes an interior part of your experience and something that you're also coating, enveloping, filling with your energy. So that means anyone who's in relationship with you, if you're a generator, is going to be experiencing that from you. And that means that if you're satisfied and your energy is healthy, that is what is embracing the person who's in your presence. And if you're frustrated or you're irritated or you're angry, then that is the frequency that is embracing and enveloping the person in front of you. So if you're in relationship with a generator and you are not a generator, it's likely that on some level, the generator somewhere energetically will likely not feel that comfortable with you. There's something about your aura that is different. They might like it for a certain amount of time. It might really work for them. I've definitely encountered certain kinds of generators that just love projectors. They just, we were calling Blossom the other day the projector collector. Some generators, they just love it. Most of the time, however, that energetic exchange is just not the same. And so for a generator to be in relationship with a different type, the absoluteness of that difference is likely never going to go away. So then if you look at what it's like to have the projector aura, to have this incredibly focused, deeply absorbing, deeply penetrating energy field. You cannot turn that off as a projector. You can't, you can kind of try to soften it. Like I'll try to sort of look at you sideways, but it doesn't really work. It's like when I see something, I see it, and if I'm seeing it in you, you're gonna feel it. And if you don't like that, if you want me to see you, but you want me to see you at like 50%, it's not going to happen. So if you're in relationship with a projector then, and you're not a projector, you've got to know that is never going away. It's never going away. The projector can try to soften themselves and try to be bouncy and fun and try to give, try to create that sense of generator givingness with their field, but it's never going to feel the same. So generators and projectors in relationship are really the ones that are built for this highly interpersonal relational dynamic and playing around with what that's about. How do we envelop each other? How do we penetrate each other? How do we have this exchange of frequency? And we're oriented that way, I think, as a priority, generators and projectors. So then if we look at what it means to be a manifestor or a reflector, it's a whole different universe. And obviously there are nuances to this. But both of those auras, the manifestor and the reflector, there's a closedness to them. With the manifestor aura, we could say it is designed to have that closed nature as the default. Now, manifestors can certainly open that up. There can be moments where they will naturally open their aura to you if they choose to. And you might feel that moment of being let in. But at any second, and especially I would say if they get into action, you're likely going to feel repelled. You're going to feel pushed out. You're going to feel impacted. You're going to notice that you become inconsequential in a way. Once that aura closes, they're no longer open to the effect of whatever you are. And further to that, especially if they're in action, the force is to repel you, to get you out of the way so that they can move forward with whatever it is they're doing. For me personally as a projector, and I think for a lot of the more relational types, whether you're a generator or a projector, it likely feels a little uncomfortable to be around the closed aura of the manifestor. There's something about it that you can't quite envelop and penetrate in the same way that you can with generators and projectors. So it's a different absolute. If you can find a way to enjoy that, be okay with that, know that that's the static home for a manifestor, then okay. But it probably wouldn't be helpful for any manifestor to try to imitate, which many of us are trying to do all the time, to imitate the generator mechanic. It's not natural. If we look at reflectors then, we can see something similar, where it's an aura that can take in, but just a little bit, and then push back out. So again, that's likely another kind of aura that I know for me as a projector, it's often very visceral, that I can't get in there. I can't lock in, just can't do it.
Over time and closeness, we are penetrated.
Yes,
So in the container of a relationship,
it can happen.
we are very vulnerable, highly
Yes,
vulnerable.
yes,
Just to clarify that.
yes. Thank you.
Could you repeat that?
Would you like to say it?
Time is the factor for a reflector in a relationship. Closeness and length of time, we have less and less resistance over time to the other. So they will get in. The generator aura will get in, the projector aura will get in. No choice. That's how it works.
Yeah. I think that's likely true with reflectors and maybe even to an extent with manifestors as well over time, like you're saying. once that's established, yeah, I could see that. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, well, it's okay, I can wait.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say in my observation with my daughter is a manifestor, and I'm a projector. Not knowing her, not even knowing design at all, and then learning design, it made so much sense to me that why she'd become angry. Her reasonings, what she would tell me, it was like, anyway, my point being is I feel like over time with the manifestor, with informing her and helping her in a way like a projector would kind of guide her to be herself, that there is this opening that has created
Yes.
like this, most people, the impact of the manifestor, you feel that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is probably a little kind of similar to what he's saying, is
Yeah.
over time with correctness.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
But it's still not the same as a generator.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same energetic dynamic, and likely in what that non-generator aura is going to give back energetically, it's not going to feel the same as a generator. It will be a different mechanic. I've certainly had relationships with manifestors where I've gotten on the inside with them, and I think a big reason that that's been able to happen is because I respect them, because I respect what they are, and I figured that out before I knew human design. I was sensitive enough to know I didn't tread on them in a way that would make them angry, and so they let me in, and then I have an open invitation with them. So certainly I think for any of us, especially if we're able to develop mutual respect in relationship, perhaps that is part of what allows us to get closer, allows us to feel comfortable just sharing space together, even with those differences, because differences can be hard. So I just think it's something to contemplate and look at, especially with what Ra emphasized so much about this movement towards sameness. So we have the aura mechanic, we have the center dynamic mechanic, and to have a center defined that your partner does not have defined is a profound thing. It's a big deal. It likely means that you're going to have times where you see your definition amplified through the other person, and it will look funny to you. You will say, John and I have a relationship where we have no shared centers. When we first got together, we looked at that and was like, this is bad. According to all of the relationship manuals, this is a bad situation. If you're having a challenging relationship, you're supposed to go to the center that you share as a way of being able to have some sort of common ground. We don't have that. So, I think we've both had the experience of me being able to see him wearing my head in ajna and him being able to see me wearing his ego. And it's not pretty. It's not very intelligent or elegant when it gets out of control. So I think it's important with center dynamics to remember that it goes both ways. So whatever your definition is, if your partner does not have that same center definition, that's something that they are likely going to have to process. They're going to be experiencing that. They may need breaks from that. You may be able to tell when they could use a break from that. You may be able to see when it flows and it is fine and it's not an issue. And then maybe there are certain times where things are ramping up or amping up, and you can see this isn't. We might need a break from being in this close, physical, engaged contact. So I think it's equally important because sometimes we can get really focused on how somebody else is affecting us. How someone else's definition is impacting us, or how we're feeling that coming in. But it's really important to notice, I think, what your definition does to somebody else. How it impacts the other. So with those kind of differences, the tendency that I see is that if someone does not have definition where you do, they will likely never have the same capacity that you do in that area. They also won't have the same kind of fixedness or particularity that you have in that area. So everything has its plus and minus. Everything has its positive and negative. To be fixed, to be defined, means to, in a way, have a consistency, have a native intelligence that's your own, have something that you can rely on in yourself, but it's also very narrow. It's rigid, it's particular, it's not going anywhere. To have an undefined center is to have some spaciousness, some potential flexibility, some potential wisdom, but it also means there is inconsistency there. You can't make something be there all the time that's not. So it's very likely, and you see this all the time in relationship, that people will get to a point where from my defined centers, I'm looking at somebody else and seeing you are inadequate. You are inadequate in this area, or you're not a heavyweight, or you can't keep up with me, or I don't feel met by you in this area. Maybe you can do it for a while. Maybe it happens sometimes in certain situations for a certain amount of time, but at some point, you can't hang anymore. You're done. You're done with my ajna. I'm done with your solar plexus, Take your ego elsewhere, whatever it might be. So if we know that, we can laugh about it instead of blaming or shaming each other about, come on, you can do it, The defined ego being like, come on, you can work it out, just fucking push a little more, you can make it work, Or the defined ajna being like, come on, think for yourself, like get there, get to your point, what's going on here? So if we know that about each other, I think it can help. And we're all very smart here. I mean, if you've gotten this far in human design, you got to have some brain power to get through all this stuff. But practically, mechanically, in interaction, I think these are the things that come up over and over and over again in relationship. So those moments of feeling inadequate, or on the other side, from my openness, I can look at my partner or the people around me where they're defined, oh my God, you're so rigid, you're so fixed, can't you just let it go? Can't you just be a little more spacious, Be a little more flexible. Does it always have to be this thing in this way, the same way, all the time? So initially in relationship, I think we have a lot more generosity about those things. And then over time, as it's hammering on us, day after day, year after year, kid after kid, house after house, it's like, yeah, I'm sick of this. Like, we got to. So there we might see where it's helpful to have some space. If we look at circuitry, then we know we also have those themes. And if you've got differences in circuitry, that's also likely something that is not going away. If you are a tribal being, you're with someone who does not have solid definition in that area, they are likely at certain points going to feel inadequate to you in terms of support, that they cannot match the level of need fulfillment and support that you are really up for. I mean, the tribal frequency is like, let's get in this together. Are we in this together? Are we doing this or not? And if we are, then yeah, we're a team. We have our agreements, we support each other. This is about support. You get the individual frequency, and it's like, I don't want to be responsible for your needs. I want you to take care of yourself, I'll take care of myself. Yes, we can help each other out in these certain ways, but that's not the foundation of how that frequency is operating. It's operating based on empowerment. Very different priority. And then if we look at the collective, we have the sharing, the diversity of that. The let's share experiences, let's share ideas, let's share beliefs, let's talk about this, let's talk about that, let's explore this, let's explore that. And there's an exchange there, and there's a socialness there that's very natural. So I just name all of these things because I know we all know these things. This is not new information. But I think the depth to which this affects how we experience each other is really profound, and it's happening all the time. And it's subtle, the ways we start to feel like, is there some way to get around this in you? I really like all this other stuff. Can we get around this one piece? And then maybe we get to a point where we realize, yeah, we can't. Like this, we don't like who we become in this bond. So when we were looking at some of the examples that that were submitted, we, I have a tendency to go right to the pain point, to be like, oh, that looks hard, that looks rough, that's intense. And John's like, easy, easy, take it easy, Amy. We don't want the people like being depressed. But I actually think that's our greatest hope of getting to the other side. Let's just face how hard it is. Like, this is hard. Let's just name it and get it on the table so we can all say, yes, this is hard. And also, so then we stop feeling like it should be easier. I mean, right now, to think that relationships should just be easy, I just don't think that's, I mean, if you are somebody who is having an easy relationship, blessings on you, good for you. But for majority of people, I don't think it's easy right now. So let's all just face facts and say, okay, this is hard. It's hard in these ways. Let's accept it. Let's acknowledge it. What a relief to know I'm not just an inadequate, unintelligent, incapable person who can't seem to manage my perfect partnership or my perfect interaction with my child or my parent or my community or whatever it is. And then we can start to see, okay, well, what then? I think that's the interesting question. If we're not fighting what is, then the interesting question becomes, okay, now what? So we were going to take a break, but we've had a bunch of breaks. I don't really know what to do now. I think we have these charts. We have some things we can look at. If anybody needs to go or you're feeling like you're tired or need a break, please feel free. We won't be offended. Why don't we just take a 5-minute break and we're going to pull out the charts to pass out to you guys because we've got some papers for you.